A recurring theme in my videos is my passion for strong theming and immersive storytelling. I'm drawn to attractions that go beyond simple thrills, looking for rides that feel like living worlds, carefully crafted to pull you in. The best of these experiences aren't just entertainment, they're works of art that leave a lasting impression, making you want to return again and again. I value all forms of themed entertainment, but I do have strong opinions about the current reliance on screen-based attractions. Screens aren't inherently a problem. In fact, there was a time when their use felt exciting and innovative. When implemented thoughtfully, they can expand a ride's storytelling and visual scope in ways that practical sets alone cannot. A perfect example of this is The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man. It didn't rely solely on screens. Instead, it integrated them with detailed sets and physical effects to create an environment that felt both tangible and dynamic. This ride showed that screens, when combined with real-world elements, could produce an experience greater than the sum of its parts. By contrast, timeless attractions like Disney's Haunted Mansion or Pirates of the Caribbean remain beloved because of their reliance on physical environments, intricate set design, and practical effects. These rides immerse guests in a complete world without depending on digital visuals to carry the experience. Their longevity proves that physical storytelling has a staying power screens alone cannot replicate. Today, both Universal and Disney lean heavily on screens. This approach has created a sense of repetition, with new attractions often feeling like variations of the same concept. The problem isn't the technology itself, it's the overuse of it. Too often, guests find themselves seated in front of large screens, wearing 3D glasses and being jostled around while the digital chaos unfolds in front of them, leaving the world around them underdeveloped. Universal was especially guilty of this in the mid-2010s at their Florida parks. While the company has begun moving away from this trend, there have been missteps, with attractions like Transformers, Jimmy Fallon, and VillainCon Minion Blast being prime examples of screen-heavy rides that failed to capture the depth and immersive quality of their more balanced predecessors. Disney hasn't been immune to this either, as over the past decade, rides like Smuggler's Run, Web Slingers, and Flight of Passage lean heavily on screens, often at the expense of physical immersion. They can entertain, sure, but they lack the layered, tangible environments that make a themed world feel truly complete. Looking ahead, there's some reason for optimism, as Epic Universe seems to have placed a stronger emphasis on blending practical effects with screen-based storytelling, signaling a potential return to balance for Universal and their attractions. In many ways, Epic feels like an acknowledgement of the criticism surrounding screen-heavy rides, and with a brand new park, Universal appears intent on giving it the best possible foundation. My only request is that I hope Disney can also see the error of too many screens and bounce back before they wind up going down the same path as Universal. The real question now is whether theme parks can truly reclaim the art of rich environmental storytelling, or whether they'll continue down the path of over-reliance on screens. That choice will shape the future of themed entertainment, deciding whether attractions will inspire the same timeless sense of wonder as the classics, or fade quickly once the novelty of technology wears off. Before we dive into the history and fatigue of screen-based attractions, don't forget to give the video a like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel since these videos take a lot of time to put together, and it lets me know what kind of content you all enjoy the most. Also, I'm doing a Q&A for the channel at the end of September, so drop any questions you'd like me to answer in the comments down below. With that said, let's get into how screen-based attractions have chipped away at immersion. Screen-based attractions are not a new concept, but their scope and sophistication have evolved dramatically over the decades. Before screens became prevalent, theme parks relied on traditional dark rides, such as Pirates of the Caribbean from Disney or E.T. Adventure from Universal. The reason these attractions stand out and are so well remembered is simple. Prior to putting everything on a screen, ride creators had to rely almost entirely on practical effects. Every scene had to be carefully crafted to tell a story that guests could follow and understand. To achieve that, designers leaned heavily on immersive world building, going above and beyond to create these worlds in small individual sets. This wasn't just done through the detailed sets and animatronics though, as designers would also tap into subtle sensory elements like the smell of rum on Pirates or the pine scent in the ETQ. Small touches like these elevated the experience, often making the ride unforgettable. The drawback, however, was that traditional dark rides were usually slow-paced. They weren't meant to be thrilling like roller coasters, and their purpose was immersion, often paired with a simple narrative. But as time went on, guests wanted something fresh and new, and theme parks began searching for a way to elevate ride experiences. The question was, how exactly would they do that? The year is 1985, and Disney CEO Michael Eisner began emphasizing new attraction experiences to elevate their parks. Early discussions considered a motion simulator-based ride on Disney's 1979 film The Black Hole, but these ideas were quickly dismissed due to the film's poor box office performance and declining popularity. Instead, Disney chose to explore a different path, turning to an intellectual property outside their own brand, this being a first for Disney and its parks. This would lead to Disney collaborating with George Lucas to create Star Tours in 1987. Star Tours opened at Disneyland in California and quickly became one of the most popular attractions in the park's history. To celebrate, Disneyland held a 60-hour party, keeping the gates open for 60 straight hours to accommodate the massive crowds eager to experience the new ride. The attraction's success was due in large part to its groundbreaking technology. Star Tours was the first motion simulator ever used in a major theme park. Until then, motion simulators were almost exclusively a military tool, designed to replicate the sensations of piloting aircraft, and to bring this technology to a theme park setting, Disney would partner with Red Diffusion Simulation, a British aerospace company, and would license their Atlas system, the Advanced Technology Leisure Application Simulator. The result was a ride vehicle capable of seating 40 passengers at once while delivering an immersive experience unlike anything seen before. The simulator offered 4 degrees of freedom, being pitch, roll, yaw, and heave, allowing it to mimic the subtle movements and weight shifts of real flight. Though the vehicle only moved a few feet in each direction, its synchronization with on-screen visuals created the illusion of boundless movement through space. And then there was the screen itself. Star Tours used 70mm film projected onto a curved screen, an approach later echoed in future attractions as well as attractions outside the Disney parks. Industrial Light and Magic, owned by George Lucas at the time, handled the visual production of the attraction, filming miniature models with motion control camera rigs and using the same optical compositing techniques developed for the original Star Wars trilogy. The result was seamless, cinematic, and thoroughly convincing. The ride's story placed guests in the Star Wars universe as passengers aboard a sightseeing shuttle piloted by the bumbling RX-24. What began as a routine trip to Endor quickly spiraled into chaos. Guests would encounter an asteroid field, an unexpected battle between the Rebels and the Empire, and even play a pivotal role in destroying the Death Star. It was thrilling, chaotic, but above all, immersive. In 2011, the attraction was reimagined as Star Tours: The Adventures Continue, now offering dozens of different story combinations, with later updates integrating content from the sequel trilogy and Disney Plus series such as The Mandalorian and Ahsoka. The success of Star Tours showed that screens, when combined with quality storytelling and complementing technology, could create a unique, immersive experience that traditional dark rides could not achieve. This principle carried forward in rides like Universal's Back to the Future or Disney's later Soarin' over California, proving that screen-based attractions could stand on their own to some capacity. By 1999, Universal's The Amazing Adventures of Spider-Man would take this approach to a new level, seamlessly integrating screens with detailed physical sets. The attraction set an industry benchmark. Digital action sequences were woven into tangible environments, and the ride system's wide range of motion captured the comic book energy of Spider-Man in ways animatronics alone could not. Additional attractions like Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey or Disney's Remy's Ratatouille Adventure would later follow this principle to some degree, as they would also blend screens and sets to create cohesive, immersive experiences. However, this balanced approach has not always been the norm. Periods of screen overuse such as Skull Island or Fast and Furious Supercharge would rely almost entirely on screens to immerse guests. While initially impressive, the novelty quickly wore off, and by 2018, Universal largely shifted away from this style, recognizing that audiences were growing weary of screen-dominated attractions. This history raises an important question. What happens when screens are overused, And how can an over-reliance on them undermine the magic of a theme park? When screens become an overused tool in attractions, a lot can go wrong. I've already covered some mainline examples in previous videos, which if you haven't seen, I recommend doing so. So today, I want to focus on a few other rides that highlight the downsides of screen-heavy design. We'll break down 2 attractions, each from Universal and Disney, focusing on what doesn't work so well, but giving props where they're due. Though I'm not covering every screen-based ride within the parks, I'd love for you to share your least favorite screen attractions in the comments below so that we can have a conversation about it. Since my channel mainly focuses on Universal, let's start with VillainCon Minion Blast. I visited Universal Orlando in December last year and noticed the ride only had a 5-minute wait toward the end of the day, so I decided to check it out. At the time, I hadn't really researched the attraction all too much, but I did know that it was similar to Toy Story Mania. Honestly, I have to say, this ride is a mess for several reasons. The concept itself is fine, and I understand I'm not the primary demographic for this attraction, but the execution is poor regardless. The pre-show area, though, is a bright spot, serving as a parody of events like Comic-Con, showcasing gadgets, posters, and funny ads. It's a clever touch that builds anticipation, but once on the ride, the problems become apparent. You stand on a moving conveyor belt, keeping yourself positioned in a circle, and move through multiple screen-filled areas while competing with other guests in a chaotic shooting gallery. While there are some physical props, and the sets surrounding the screens have light theming, it's not enough to distract from the overwhelming focus on screens. That being the main issue, of course, and the problem with this is the fact that so much action happens at once that it quickly becomes visual chaos. Even though I could see my reticle, though barely, the entire experience felt cheap and overstimulating. Some might argue that the problem isn't the screens themselves, but I disagree. Compare this to Men in Black Alien Attack, which relies almost entirely on physical props. Not only can you clearly see your targets and feel in control, but the ride vehicles also separate groups of guests and take different paths, keeping the experience dynamic and personal. In addition, the ride is a massive New York set filled with animatronics and even features a giant alien at the end that eats you. In my eyes, Men in Black is much more compelling than Minion Blast, and that alone makes it a far stronger attraction. The larger problem is that Universal has leaned heavily on screen-based rides for years, particularly in the studio's park. When so many attractions rely on the same core technology, they start to blend together. Even if the ride systems differ, the constant focus on screens creates screen fatigue. Guests grow tired of hopping from one screen-heavy ride to another, and that fatigue has been an ongoing issue for a long time. Back in 2017, when I worked at Universal as a ticket salesman, I saw this firsthand. I could easily sell guests on Islands of Adventure, but selling the studio's park was a different story. Step back and really look at the studio's park. What does it have to offer that isn't a highly screen-based attraction? And the reality of that is there's really only a handful. A lot of guests will point to Escape from Gringotts and say it's not a screen problem, as that attraction draws big crowds and long wait times, but if it didn't have the Harry Potter name attached, would it still command the same attention? It's hard to say, but not something we'll ever know. What we do know is that the overuse of screens has become a major turnoff for many guests. And the problem only gets worse when lower effort attractions like VillainCon Minion Blast are presented as if they're headline experiences. These moments highlight a trend. The park sometimes leans on spectacle and familiar IP instead of creating truly immersive, memorable rides. Focusing on Gringotts yet again, I understand why so many parkgoers love it, but for me, it ultimately holds the park back, because it's yet another screen-based ride. Guests often excuse this since it doubles as a roller coaster, which does make the experience feel unique, and while I would normally agree, it is a problem due to the fact that the park is already overflowing with screens. Gringotts only adds to the problem rather than breaking the trend. That's not to say it isn't enjoyable. I still ride it almost every visit, but imagine if Universal had built something closer to Revenge of the Mummy, with towering sets, animatronics, and immersive detail. The queue proves they're capable of that. With the Goblin animatronics, the Grand Bank facade, and the unique loading area, it's all just fantastic, and it makes me wish the ride itself carried that same physical weight. Gringotts does shine in some areas though, the stalagmites hanging from the walls, the physical vault doors, or the clever sequence where the screen opens to let the coaster pass as the dragon breaks through. Those moments prove the attraction's potential, but they're too few in an otherwise screen-heavy experience. In the end, Gringotts is a fun and high-quality ride, but it feels like a missed opportunity. Instead of becoming a timeless classic, it's settled for being another screen ride. Good, but never as extraordinary as it could have been. Turning to Disney, I'll admit the company hasn't relied on screens to the same extent Universal has with their Studios park. Since I often do spend a lot of time analyzing Universal here on the channel, I do want to take this time to shift gears and take a closer look at Disney, specifically Galaxy's Edge, and even more specifically, Smuggler's Run. Galaxy's Edge is themed around the planet Batuu, a location created specifically for the parks, which opened at Disneyland and Disney's Hollywood Studios in 2019. The land centers on the sequel trilogy, a choice that still doesn't really make any sense to anyone. Its debut included Smuggler's Run, a motion simulator where guests pilot the Millennium Falcon. Guests would enter the Black Spire Outpost and meet Hondo Ohnaka, the pirate and smuggler familiar to fans of the Clone Wars and the Rebels cartoon shows. Personally, I will say, I found Hondo far more compelling in the Clone Wars than in Rebels, but that's neither here nor there. For the attraction, guests take on high-risk smuggling missions for Hondo aboard the Falcon, transporting coaxium, a rare hyperfuel. The ride seats 6 members, 2 pilots, 2 gunners, and 2 engineers. Pilots handle horizontal and vertical movement, gunners target enemies, and engineers repair the ship and harpoon coaxium. While the teamwork element is clever, the ride's cheap experience isn't something I would expect from Disney. For such a massive IP, the execution feels underwhelming. What should have been an exciting way for Disney to show off their acquisition of Star Wars and create something grand, instead comes across like a glorified arcade game. Disney would later add Rise of the Resistance, a trackless dark ride with animatronics, but even then, I can't help but imagine something more ambitious. Something like Spaceship Earth for Star Wars, a journey through the timeline from the Old Republic to the sequels, or even a ride more similar to Spider-Man but based around the Clone Wars. I feel those attractions would have been far more compelling than what we received. So, even though Disney perhaps didn't handle Star Wars the best, what about Marvel? This was Disney's true money printer, at least before Avengers Endgame. You could argue that in more recent years, Marvel hasn't quite hit the same level of quality, but we're not here to discuss the films. Looking at the parks, we've got Cosmic Rewind at Epcot, and though I could dive into that, it honestly hits more or less the same gripes I have with Gringotts, so I won't beat a dead horse. What else? Let's see. Mission Breakout, which replaced Tower of Terror on the West Coast. It's a solid ride, though the facade is a bit off-putting. There has to be one more. Oh, that's right. Avengers Campus at Disneyland, which opened in 2021. This could honestly warrant its own video, but for today, I want to focus specifically on Web Slingers. Disney's attempt at a Spider-Man attraction for the West Coast is, well, extremely underwhelming. What should have been a fun, exciting way to showcase their version of Marvel, using the MCU they've been crafting for years, instead feels like a glorified Kinect game. I go so far as to say that this might be the worst screen-based attraction on this list. Not only is it a screen-heavy ride, but it's also the mainline attraction for Avengers Campus, which makes the blow hit even harder. Disney already has plenty of arcade-style rides, like Toy Story Mania and Buzz Lightyear's Space Ranger Spin, both of which are much better attractions and full of charm and character. By comparison, Web Slingers feels incredibly generic. The reliance on screens isn't the attraction's only issue, as it also falters in other areas. Since your hands act as the web blasters, the sensors are frustratingly inconsistent, making it feel like the attraction is constantly fighting you. On top of that, the queue, like the ride itself, has this high school tech expo garage theme that's just uninspired. While Disneyland doesn't suffer from screen fatigue as badly as its competitor, Web Slingers shows how quickly this could become a real problem if Disney keeps leaning on cheap, screen-based attractions. Universal has been learning this lesson for years, and while they're not perfect by any means, they have figured it out to some degree with the balance of screens and physical sets. However, I do have to give Disney credit for a few things, that mainly being the retheming of Splash Mountain into Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Even though it's not themed to an IP I'm particularly interested in, it did a solid job, and it features more animatronics than screens, something I'm not seeing a lot in attractions being revitalized these days, and it's something that I hope if Disney decides to refresh or redo an attraction is something we can get more of, as it's a very refreshing change. So now the question becomes, how can these parks avoid, or even pull themselves back from, becoming overrun with screen-heavy attractions? Looking at the parks, the clearest way to course correct is by adding more meaningful attractions and keeping a healthy variety. Screen rides don't have to disappear entirely, plenty of them are done well, and even some motion simulators hold their own. The issue is when a park becomes oversaturated. Variety is of course what keeps things interesting and guests returning. And while I would personally love to see more traditional dark rides, they have become way more rare, and I don't foresee either Disney or Universal really making a change in that pace. I think we're more likely to see these hybrids that we've been seeing for a few years now. However, if the parks can find a balance between screens, dark rides, and coasters, without just beginning to mash each and every one of them together, they can create an engaging park experience instead of one where guests are dragging themselves from one screen attraction to the next. Stepping away from screens for a moment, let's talk about the traditional dark ride. I consider them the purest form of theme park art. This is something I've wanted to cover for a while now, but it never quite justified its own video. Here though, it fits perfectly, especially with everything we've discussed so far. When it comes to traditional dark rides, they can often excel in ways that screen-based or even hybrid attractions cannot. Of course, this depends on the focus of the ride itself. Something like Transformers or Spider-Man would not work as a purely traditional dark ride because those franchises demand a certain level of action and intensity. But attractions like E.T., Haunted Mansion, Pirates of the Caribbean thrive in that format and even today hold their own in the modern theme park landscape. What makes them work is the commitment to detail. Every scene is its own fully realized set, packed with things you notice more and more each time you ride. It is the charm of physical sets, the personality of older animatronics, and even those signature scents tied to those attractions. All of these pieces come together to create an immersive experience that screens alone could not replicate. It is one of the reasons I love Halloween Horror Nights so much, because you see how meticulously crafted and detailed those sets are. That same passion for set design is what I hope both Disney and Universal rediscover, because traditional dark rides absolutely have their place in theme parks. Not only do they hold up, but I think there is still a real demand for them. Thank you all so much for watching and for helping me reach almost 7,000 subscribers. Hitting this milestone is incredible, and I truly appreciate the support. If you enjoyed this video and potentially would like to see a part 2, let me know by liking the video. I will be on vacation for most of September, so the next video will arrive at the end of this month, that being the Q&A, so don't forget to leave a question down below. After that, you can look forward to some Halloween content here on the channel. Once again, thank you all so much for your support, as I wouldn't be here without any of you, and I'll see you all in the next video.